Yeah, just a while. Doesn't really apply anymore. Thank you.
Got another minute or two before that's just about time, but good morning. It's good to see you all here. We'll be talking a little bit about EFM. So this is always something that we do at the end of every year. It gives the people who participate an opportunity to kind of reflect a little bit and to talk a little bit about what EFM has meant to them, and at the same time to hopefully let people know kind of what EFM is. Those letters a lot, and they sound a little bit scary and intimidating. So hopefully this will give you all an idea of what this program is and why it is so important. I do really quickly want to welcome Wanda, who is hasn't been here before, I don't believe. So this is your first morning with us. So welcome. It's great to have you here, and you'll get to worship with us and learn a little bit about how we worship and a little bit about EFM as well. At least that's something I'll do at some point. Just as a couple of words of introduction about EFM, you know, this past Sunday, one of the readings from the Revised Common Lectionary was one of my favorite passages. It was the Acts story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, which I just think is a wonderful story on a lot of levels. But what always strikes me is that the Ethiopian eunuch is reading Isaiah and he's kind of wrestling with this text and trying to figure out what it means. And so Philip asked him, you know, do you understand this? He says, no, how can I? Somebody helps you. So they read it together. So they read this Isaiah text together in community, and that is when the text is opened up for the eunuch. And I'm guessing that it's opened up for Philip as well. He is exploring this text with somebody who has a very different perspective and a different understanding. So this is the way that Episcopalians like to approach texts, whether scriptural or otherwise. We read them in community and we learn from one another. And I think that really is central to EFM. They read texts together, biblical texts, theological texts, historical texts, and they read them in community. They bring their own perspectives, their own scholarship, and together they learn much, much more than anybody could if they were to take those exact same texts and sit at home and read them by yourself. So this is really the power of EFM, I think. Bob Link was going to be here to lead this discussion about EFM, but something came up and he was not able to be with us. Many of you haven't been here that long, and so you probably think of EFM as kind of synonymous with Bob Link and Ashley Harper Overly. When I got here, EFM was synonymous with Jamie. And she was the mentor for many, many years, and saw many classes through EFM together. And so she's going to be sitting in for Bob this morning. And it's great to have her here. And really, she's one of the people that building that EFM foundation. So important to us. So thank you, James. Yeah.
And also a former mentor, student. We're happy to have you. Yeah, Bruce Lomax. He was in one of the first classes that we had. In fact, he was a very original mentor who could only be given as a Peggy Rush from Blanco. And she was very well schooled and she very well and then her help from the continuing. But there are a lot of graduates. I think 35 so.
Wow.
And it is a change your life experience. That's what I call it since that happened to me. And so thank you for being here. Bruce and I are simply here Because we love it. And because, maybe because Bob asked us to be.
He's a rather persuasive person.
Our fallback position.
Yeah, okay, well, but, you.
Yeah, why don't we turn it over to Sharon?
Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Our Father, who has set a restlessness in our hearts, and as all seekers after that which we can never fully find, forbid us to be satisfied with what we make of life. Draw us from base content and set our eyes on far off goals. Give us at tasks too hard for us, that we may be driven to deeper strength. Deliver us from fretfulness and self-pity. Make us sure of the goal we cannot see and of the hidden good in the world. Open our eyes to simple beauty all around us and our hearts to the loveliness men hide from us because we do not try enough to understand them. Save us from ourselves and fill us a vision of a world made new. May thy spirit of peace and illumination so enlighten our minds that all life shall flow with new meaning and new purpose with Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Okay, well, it's good to see everybody. I was afraid yesterday when Bob called me that I was gonna end up just preaching to the choir here. But we have a couple of graduates, because Tony is a graduate, Wilson is a graduate, and he's still participating with us, and I mean, he's a big help to all of us that are muddling through it still. But as far what is EFM, it's Education for Ministry. It started in 1975. It is a 4-year program. We have 4 different classes. So we have our first year group studying the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. Our second year group is studying the New Testament. Our third year is church history, which is what Leigh and I are doing right now. And it's been rough. The church history is not pretty. It really is not pretty. And then our fourth year is theology. And I'm really excited about fourth year. Really, really looking forward to that for next year. So this is a very different course in religion and theology, because I had taken many, many, many Bible studies over the years, but this is not a Bible study. This is not a normal type Bible study that I had participated in the past. And I was really ready to get into the meat. I wanted to know more. I wanted to do a deeper dive, and EFM has definitely done that for me. It says it does not provide, although it does not provide an education in the content of the Christian tradition through reading the Bible along. It does provide, sorry. It does provide an education in the content of the Christian tradition through reading the Bible alongside some basic biblical commentary, church history, and practical introductions to Christian theology and ethics, as well as encouraging an appreciation for ways in which Christians respond to encounters with those of other faiths. And that's been really valuable to me. And it's not just other faiths, it's other backgrounds. We just read a book that was very, very hard to read, but it really opened my eyes to the Black community and their history and what there it is. A very different perspective. And we read one of the books we read, because we have each year has its own book to read, but then we have some shared readings. And the shared reading we did in the fall was Seeking a Non-Binary God. And that also was very eye-opening, because it's not part of my experience. So to see that perspective, and it was not written by a non-binary person, it was written by the parent of a transgender person. And again, just really eye-opening, really enriching and enlightening. So so we get together every week. We share we can share what we've learned, we share what we've read, and it's been a really great way to grow spiritually here. So we're gonna go ahead and move on unless there's any questions about the basics, or if you want to add something to that.
I'd just like to add, that at the end of the completion of 4 years, the founding, seminary, Swan, Episcopal Seminary in Tennessee, who, started this and oversees it, and administers it, and makes the choices, graduates are awarded, a certificate of completion that, that's great. It's one of the hardest certificates I ever earned. And I think that's important. And also, it's important that graduates can return and study a year again and be full students. And that's been important to quite a few of our former graduates.
The material slightly changes, right? And you read different things than you read the first time.
Yes, except for Old Testament, the commentators or whatever, they stay the same for the first 3 years.
How much time do you spend during the week in preparation?
I think that's a great question to be answered. Who's here present? I wonder.
Jumping ahead, but I like to think of EFM as kind of a graduate course, and it's not just comparative religion, it's our religion. Historical basis of our religion and the philosophical underpinnings of our religion. And so it meets for 3 hours. It doesn't meet year round, as you're probably aware. It meets for like
The school year.
University curriculum, you start in September, you finish in late May or early June. And it's 3 hours on Monday morning. And it's like I like to think of it as a graduate level course.
Okay, it's 3 hours on Monday,
Yes,
but how much information?
I was going to get to that. Like a graduate course, well, you know, they when I was in college, they used to say, well, for each college hour that you take, it probably takes 2 hours of preparation to grasp your material and be able to pass tests and things like this. For a graduate course, they said it takes 3 hours. Now, I think, you know, to state that it takes 3 hours of preparation for each hour of classroom, I think overstates it. I don't think you have to take that much. Part of it is because the readings, although it's expected that you do the readings, some of the readings, even Sewanee acknowledges you're not going to read all the begats in the Old Testament, and you know, some of us take appropriate notes, but most of us do not. And therefore, if you get the gist of what, particularly one of the Old Testament books, that's sufficient. And similarly, I'm here to the James version, but you know, you can find a version of the Bible that's readable. Revised Standard is much readable James to most people. So that I think that if you end up spending probably about 2 to 4 hours in preparation, depending on whether you have an assigned task that week. But I don't think it's onerous. I mean,
You're doing the Old Testament 1 year
yes,
and the New Testament 1 year.
yes, we'll get to that too. But the Old Testament, it's the first year. It's probably the most difficult. Gene can tell you that. Because
That's because you
first
haven't
of all,
church
if you're there by yourself, my wife Fran had the same experience. It's like, okay, now we got 3 or 4 people here to discuss the New Testament, and we're reading this week pages long, letter to. But you, on the other hand, read Psalms and Proverbs. So would you summarize those in 15 minutes? And so, and so the tendency is to say, wow, that was a big chunk of material.
There are no tests. Well, that's important.
Yeah.
because It's like coming prepared is how you prepare to.
I'm not, you know, I've taken a lot of Bible study. I'm comfortable, you know, but there's still much, you know, it's a lot to grasp. I know.
Well, this is just the Bible.
The Old Testament. I mean, there's a
Well-
lot of information, I'm surprised you could cover that in here.
The other thing is the expectation is you're gonna show up, even if you haven't done the reading, and it's gonna, browbeat you for
I'm not exactly.
not being prepared.
Okay. Just, I kind of want to get the feel and I don't want to. The importance that you're putting into it. You say you gotta for your program. I think I already take that a little serious. Because
Yeah,
I should be doing.
it's a time investment, and, the expectation is that you're going to continue. Some people don't.
Okay, we need to move on, but from my own experience, I would say 3 to 5 hours of reading and study every week beyond the 3 hour class. Okay, so, at the beginning of every year, we all share our spiritual autobiography. And so Wilson's gonna tell us about that process.
We spend the first 3 months getting to know each other. And one of the big things we have to do is sit down on a piece of paper, figure out who we are. And it changes over 4 years. And the task is, okay, who am I? And you begin to say, well, we can here, and you go to, then I was educated, and this is who I am. And then as we go along, it sort of changes, and it says, okay, spiritually, who am I? What were the major influences in my life that caused me to be the Christian that I am today? And that's kind of the sum total of every experience that we have, and you have to sit through that. Something magical really happens as we share the stories around the table, and it's right that we do take 3 months to get to know each other. And we develop some really interesting relationships because of those stories that we share. And then over time, we begin to sort of translate this into what is the core spiritual DNA that makes up who I am. And that's kind of an interesting transformation as that happens. But it's one of the best things we do. And there are some really intense friendships that happen around this table over 4 years. And we become very supportive of each other. And that's because a lot of what we share is very personal and it doesn't leave the room. And nobody's gonna talk about you when you leave here. And you begin to say, okay, can I trust this group and share who I really am? And that's the beauty of it, is we found that the trust level and the listening that goes into this. And for me, it's one of the most powerful things we do.
And I think that's one of the core benefits is that we are learning in community, and that feeling of community is really important and really takes root. And I mean, we consider it our EFM family. I mean, it's valuable. It's extremely valuable. Thank you, Wilson. And then every week, one person shares their theological reflection. And so that's assigned every week. It's a different person. So if there are 8 of us in the class, you're going to do it once every 8 weeks. If there's 10 people in the class, you're going to do it once every 10 weeks. And that it's really, again, it's part of being part of the community. We intend it to be interactive. Everyone is going to be able to participate in it. We want everybody to participate in it, but one person chooses a topic that's near and dear to them. And it's a way of looking, again, it's a theological reflection, looking at a topic through a theological lens. And Swanee says that there are 4 sources. One is our actions, our personal lives, the things we do every day. 2 is our personal beliefs. What is it that we hold dear? What is it that motivates us? 3 is culture. What do we see in the world around us that's the complexity of the world can trigger some deep theological reflection. And then tradition, the church tradition. There's things in the church tradition that can also be a source for this. So again, every week it's different. Every week it's a different person leading. But everybody is participating. And so the topics, for me, when I'm doing one, it's something something just usually pops out in the weeks that I'm preparing, something that I keep hearing or something that, is troubling me or something I've read that just doesn't sit right. So I do a deep dive on that. And then I want to share and bring that to the table and ask the group, where do you sit with this? How does this sit with you? Again, so, and sometimes it's listening to a podcast. One that I did recently was on original sin, because I heard a podcast, by Danielle Schroyer about original blessing. And it really got me to thinking about that concept of original sin. And then since Lee and I are doing fourth year, we saw when and where that idea came into, be part of church tradition, because it just doesn't sit right with me. So, so that was one of my TRs, theological reflections this year. I've done one on humor and laughter. I've done one on using the Lectio Divina. So it's a different way of looking at scripture that has helped me. And I don't do it every day, but sometimes so sometimes we learn a new way to look at the word. So there are the 4 steps, the 4 movements in our theological reflection. The first is to identify a focus, find a question, ask a question. And sometimes there's 2 or 3 questions that are kind of related. Tomorrow I'm doing a TR on doubt, because that's something that has just been popping up in my reading over the last couple of months, things that we've been hearing and seeing that have raised some doubts. And so I'm wrestling with that. So, got some questions there. But again, I know Rick did a great TR just recently on listening, and Sharon did one on angels. So it's always different. It's always something new. It's always a new perspective. And then we do a deep dive. We explore, we focus on 3 or 4 questions or an image or an idea. And then we connect those to our sources. What does our tradition tell us? What does the scripture tell us? What does our own experience tell us about that topic? And then we apply it. We try to apply it. How does that apply to me? Is this something that I need to change? Is this an area where I need to grow? And so we want to apply it to our everyday life. So anybody else want to add to that? Any of the folks who are, because we've all done them now. All of us who are in EFM have done several.
Well, Dave talking about the Ethiopian church has kind of resonated with me. I think, boy, I'd like to find out more about how the church came to Ethiopia. And I remember seeing in National Geographic carvings and the caves of different places of worship. And that's some of mine. I start out with these people in the early church that stood on pillars all the time. Oh, fascinating idea. Because the church is a community, but at the same time, the church is like an individual relationship, and it's kind of are at odds with each other. So anything that, again, I think it should be personal, but almost anything can be made personal. The theme for this year is spiritual maturity, but almost anything can be made to deal with one's spiritual development.
And again, it is intended to be interactive. It's something we all participate in. And I think that's what makes it adds to it, because everybody's participating. And it's really the heart of what we do at EFM. I mean, the readings are important, and what we're learning is important, but that time to share together with these, getting into a theological topic, and it doesn't have to be a theological topic. Like I said, I did one on humor and laughter.
They're really fun, a lot of them. I think Karen McBride, who's not here, unfortunately, she does games with them and has flashcards.
I mean, it's 1/3 of what we did, it's a whole hour.
I've learned more through the discussions, or I've learned a lot through the discussion, besides the reading. uh, banter. And the theological reflections that the questions pop up and things like that.
It's a lot of
So
fun. I mean, it's fun.
Yeah,
And everybody is so different because Wilson generally uses music when he's doing a TR because that's where his heart is. And,
And use pictures. and-
yeah, really beautiful artwork that he's brought.
Disseminates books.
But Karen was a history teacher for many, many years, and so she usually starts us off with a game, with a fun game. And so it's so individual. So everybody's gonna take a slightly different approach on it.
It'd be
And-
cartoons.
Yeah, Nancy Evelyn used to bring us a collection of cartoons, but surprisingly, there was a theological focus there. Like, okay, wow. But, and again, it's a new topic every week, and the person who's leading gets to choose that topic and bring it to us for the week. All right, and then we go to our assigned readings. And so, well, you've already kind of talked about that, Rick.
I can, one thing we haven't mentioned is that there's this book, Reading and Reflection Guide, that's disseminated at the beginning of the year. It changes from year to year. And the readings are a combination of, there's going to be somebody describing each year. But in addition to the readings for each year, the Old Testament for year one, the New Testament for year two, and there's also a historical account of how those books in the New Testament, Old Testament, and New Testament came about that accompanies that. And it's like a beacon for people that feel like this is just impenetrable, or it's just too much for me to decipher. That will straighten you out. So that's almost as important, or as important as actually reading the assigned readings for that week. There are also well, this is, like I say, a template. Each year has its own separate reading, and then there's 6 units for the year. There's an essay in this book that accompanies each of it's an introduction to each of the 6 units. And then in addition, Sewanee has a reading list, a common reading list where like the Cross and the Lynching Tree was on the common reading list for this year. And these are books, Sewanee was originally started as a divinity school, I believe. It was University of the South, they wore academic gowns and so on. But I would say that there's it is really, the academics there in the divinity school are really led by a progressive wing of the Episcopal. And so that you may find that if you take a very conservative or a conservative view of what our church should be, that's these readings are challenging, or they may even be very difficult to discuss. But that actually turns out to be pretty well from a discussion perspective, is that it's kind of like confronting things that you don't want to confront. It's always, examining your life is always a good idea. And generally we can reach a common ground on each of these shared readings. So I didn't mean to talk so long about this, but and Gina's going to talk about the Old Testament since that's what she's doing in years 2, 3.
I'd like to add, Ashley Harper is our other mentor, and she spends a good part of her life in seminary. And she said, you need to understand all of the books that you read here. We read those same books in seminary. So it's, they go deeper than we probably do in the short amount of time that we're together around the table, but it's the exact same reading list. They have a lot more, but the core is part of what they do. So that was enlightening. We aren't off in left field more.
This is kind of related to what Rick said, but one of the things that I feel like I observe about the overall program of EFM is it does remind me just of the process of seminary, which begins with a process of deconstruction is what I call it. And so we all bring in, we all showed up to seminary thinking we know it all, we've got it all figured out. And that first year we had everything written. all of our assumptions, all of our beliefs. I see that happen to a lot of people in EFM as well. It's painful and it is very, very important. It's necessary. And you have to trust in the program that deconstruction will be followed by reconstruction. Again, just from talking to people who've gone through AFM, I find that that's true every time, but you kind of have to be willing to trust in that whole process because it's painful in many ways.
As foundational as this concept is, I believe Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living.
And when we talk about seminary, probably referring more to age and time than going forward when people would say that, and this. We've been going into as my son so, we have already, really seeking, because when we're 20s, I mean, the seminary, they start, yeah, you're bulletproof and. I live at least for a while. And then it was being Princeton. I understand.
Well, I can promise as a person who went to seminary at 50, that it's still possible to experience some of that deconstruction.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Fran had the same idea when she took it, is that she felt like her faith had been deconstructed, and then she said, I'm having a really hard time rebuilding it. If you go into the program and you think, well, the Bible is literal, God wrote it, I believe it, and that's all there is to it, this probably is not the program for you, or it only is if you're starting to have kind of second thoughts about that type of concept, because one of the things that really infuriated several people, we've been doing this, or I've been doing it, is that they weren't even sure if these commentaries in the Bible were written by somebody that was a Christian, because they could say, well, obviously such and such a person probably didn't exist, or they're just a composite and there's no historical record of it. And that bothers a lot of people.
I think one of the questions that I have is, maybe it's because I've seen it in the education process, is learn everything, but then there comes the application. So my thing with, it's not a thing, it's just, EFM says education for ministry. So it's preparing, this is just me, it's preparing people for ministry. So I guess what I'd like to hear, because I'm more around, okay, so how's it prepared you for your ministry? And what ministry are, I'm gonna use the word called to through EFM, because that's always been my question when I talk to EFM folks, is like, great. Like, for example, in my graduate school program, you have to do a year of field work along with what you're learning and what you're is there the application of what you're learning? Or is it just, we all sit around and just visit and talk about it? But I can tell from all of you, because I know you live it. But to me, what I've always been asking about with EFM is how to prepare you for your ministry. Or what is the ministry that you were called to do as part of EFM?
I think your ministry is your interaction with other people, always,
Sure.
every day.
Yeah.
The world is the ministry.
Yes.
I think it prepares you for all different kinds of people and all different kinds of questions.
That's fine.
Okay, because you're looking at the world from all these different perspectives. And for the first time, like non-binary. Well, who knows, my daughter thinks she's non-binary, so it's gonna help me interact
I can
with
call
her.
myself non-binary.
Huh?
I can call myself a non-binary.
Yeah, but and different cultures and different religions, and the questions that people have about, well, the Bible contradicts itself. Well, I'm aware of most all of those now, I mean, so yeah, it does sometimes, I mean, that's the truth. So, I mean, it prepares you for all of that, and the end result of that, it makes your faith much stronger after the deconstruction part. Because that's painful. I think it's more painful when you're older than it is when you're younger, because you've learned all these things. You're so convinced of it. Like the first year book, I wanted to throw that book against the wall. I don't know how many
Yeah,
times.
we get the 3 or 4 deconstruction.
Yeah.
But seriously, it isn't, to me,
Can
it's.
you give an example of deconstruction?
I'm not gonna give you my version of what it is.
Just one idea.
Well, it's kind of like a lot of your hardcore things that maybe you believe all get destroyed. And then you turn around and you come to the point where, okay, well, let's just start over. And then you start picking stuff and rebuilding your perspective. You know, and your understanding.
I'm watching one thing, isn't it wonderful how sit here honestly and oppositionally perhaps, and feel safe and feel relief to do that. That's, I'm saying that.
Lee, would you be saying that possibly, and I do, about deconstruction, you know, I think personally, I think sometimes denominational dogma. That, for me, that was a deconstruction. of
Oh, yeah.
Information and experience and education. That's what I was saying.
Well, a lot of the things that we believe in church and that we profess in church, I think we say, and believe without thinking much about them. Oh, you know, there's a tendency here. And for example, just the Nicene Creed. And if you start to, if you, and we have actually done this again, you parse that and break it up and see how it developed, and basically the Nicene Creed was spun off because Constantine had to go fight the Vandals in North Africa. He said, you come up with a creed like right away and incorporate these things in it or else. And that's what they did. And so Bob, for example, refers to the Apostles' Creed. And, you know, so things like, did Jesus go to hell for 3 days? What was he doing down there? Wilson says he was raising hell down there. Something to think about, you know, commonly say, oh, I know exactly what was going on there. And so it creates opportunity for reflection on what we actually believe and sharing that with each other.
By knowing that, right, out there in the world and you're out there in the community, how do you applicate that and put it into practice?
Well, it's not social work. I don't look at it that way. I think that a lot of what I incorporate is subconsciously and in terms of the way that I behave towards others and trying to behave in a more Christ-like manner. And that to me is enough. I mean, recently somebody told me like, you need to go get a life. I started thinking, I think I've got one already. I got all this other stuff.
Let me know, for
I've
example,
got too many people pushing and trying to get something out of me
the
right now.
EFM is also very social action.
Oh, yeah.
It may advocate that, but I think the way that you apply that is personal.
But for me, like, my daughter's a graphic artist and she does Comic Cons all over the country. Not quite as many now after COVID as she did before, but I love to go help her, and it puts me in contact with a lot of younger people and people with a very different perspective than I have. And sometimes they see me, they see my cross, and they think I'm an old church lady, and they want to challenge me. You know, well, this, you know, this is, you know, can't be true. And sometimes, you know what? Now I can say, you know what? That's a really great question. I don't know, but that's something I want to find out about. You know, tell me about it. Tell me what you think. And just, it disarms them for one thing, because I won't argue with them. Yeah, you're right. The Bible's full of contradictions, you know. But that doesn't weaken my faith. That comes from a whole different place.
Yeah, see, that's application.
Right.
And seminary, of course, is designed for a specific application, a specific type of ministry. But I can say that as far as the seminary experience went, it trained me to think theologically about everything I do, whether it's, you know, liturgy, pastoral care, teaching, anything else. And I think that's true for EFM on some level. You really learn to reflect theologically about what your ministry is, kind of on a deeper level. The other thing that comes with the deconstruction is just humility. And you know, most of us can't be humbled enough. Like, it's really important to be just reminded, and this gets to what Barb was just saying. Instead of trying to kind of impose your views or ideas on others, maybe ask questions and to learn from people and to invite people into conversation is a great tool in ministry.
The trail book on 420 happens to have a form of commitment to Christian service. And it is used, it's very short, but it's used in whenever somebody would wish to go out into the world. And it just says this, to minister at the altar, may the Holy Spirit guide and strengthen you, that in this and all things you may do God's will in the service of the kingdom of his Christ. So I call that universal.
Gene, did we?
Sorry,
Are we getting there? Okay.
Sorry,
That's all right. I am first year. And the books were the Hebrew Bible by John Collins, and then the second read was Hebrew Bible, Feminism and Intersection Perspective, and that was edited by Gail Beauty. The main book is the first one. Now, for me, I've had people bugging me about reading for a while. So I finally decided to do it, retired full time. Because I was always told, you gotta read, you gotta read, you gotta read. To be honest, if you are a reader, it's not that. Read anyway, it's not that. And I used very little version of character. The message? Yes, yes. When I got to some of those, I had to figure it out because I couldn't get through the other. Like a lot of people, when I came, you know the stories of creation, Exodus, Joshua, Joseph, Ezekiel, Daniel. You've had those things when you were a little kid. Poetry. So that's stuff you're familiar with in the Old Testament. And then you're familiar with Psalms, and Isaiah, and some Ezekiel, because those are used in the church services. So you get little snippets here, and there's snippets there, some departments. But for me, it was very interesting because I never read completions of these. Some of it was hard reading. I had a hard time with something. As we killed lots of people. That was difficult for me. But, I had to keep reminding myself, this is not history. This is not religious history. And it's a religious history of a group of people. And I had to remind myself, this is a different culture. This is a different time. These things were done by everybody. This put it off for 4 weeks. I know that from other studies. But I had to remind myself about that all the time. One of the things that I did like was it gave me a very interesting look at who wrote, edited, and when was it done, which I had never thought of. That was very helpful. Also, I think there are lessons in the Old Testament for everybody, so there's always something you can take away. The second book, and I hate to say this because I worked in women's studies. But they need a new book. Well, because I understand, I do understand. It is very difficult for feminine scholars in Bible and the biblical to accept the way women were treated and the fact that there's lacking talking about women very much in the Bible. I get that. And they don't like the patriarchal society and that women were always seen as evil, but they really. Maybe that doesn't help much. It doesn't. I think one of the best things about being in is this. Your ideas are challenged, but they don't necessarily change what you believe. But what it does is it makes you open up to all possibilities.
And to me, that is one of the most important things you can do when it comes to your health. Know that you must be open to other things.
Okay, Sharon is,
Okay,
going to talk about second year.
yeah, we're going through the New Testament. And I'm loving it because it's all about love and Jesus. And it gives me hope after reading the Old Testament. The Old Testament, those didn't realize. But anyway, it's very interesting, and some chapters are longer than other chapters. So it depends on if it's gonna be a long reading, I'll read it throughout the week. If it's gonna be a fairly long or a short one, I'll head to my she shed on Sunday and I'll read it all and do my studying and things like that, and I'll be fresh for Monday morning. I've grown in theological wisdom, not only on my past experience, but by other people in EFM's experiences and how these experiences shape their lives and who they are. Reflecting theologically increases the awareness of God's presence in daily life. It's increased my faith and made the church service more memorable. I'm a cradle Episcopalian. I've been through the service a long, long time. But with EFM, it's given the service a whole new meaning. I understand what I'm reading. I need the reading. It's not just reading it, it's absorbing it. It's changed my life. And that the education has guided me to feel the presence of the Holy Spirit more clearly and live my life in a whole different way. It's really changed me. And last, I'm more aware of the peace that passes all understanding. I feel it in my heart. I'm the closest I've ever been to God.
Yeah. And we're gonna move right along because I know Lee needs to go because he's serving as acolyte this morning.
Yep.
So he's our third year rep.
All right, well, I'm not a reader. My eyes look like this. So I can only read for a little while before I get a headache and all that. So, and this is a book I had to read this year, 1,000 pages.
Yes.
Well, yeah, except for there's a little date in the back. But anyway,
It takes
so,
over your weeds.
but this book is a condensed history of the world. Okay, 3,000 years in here. Okay, and if you're familiar with, if you're a historian, you understand history already, and this book is going to be a lot easier.
Is that supplemental reading?
No, that is.
No,
our
this
reading.
is the text.
It's actual assignment.
This is the text, but we only read 30 to 50 pages a week. Okay, so what I do is I try to read 10 pages a day. And sometimes, you know, and that way I can go through the week. And there's also I found well, I was a little bit frustrated or something, but I found somebody that had written an EMF guide on this book.
The study guide.
And each chapter, which is 30 to 50 pages long, is condensed to one page. Okay, so,
The Dean finds all about this.
so anyway, this helps, there's all bullet points on here, questions, and this helps me, you know, a lot, you know, because if I get through this and I can't remember a thing I read, well, at least I can come in here and talk about this stuff. So I'm gonna pass that around
Where did you find that?
on the internet,
Of course.
who knows where, but it's written by somebody that was probably a mentor or something.
Possibly that.
But this man, his family, you know, he comes from a family, a line of 3 generations of Anglican priest and all that. And then he grew up kind of skeptical of the whole thing. In fact, he's still skeptical of the whole thing. But he dedicated his life to understanding the whole history of the church. And he has this vast, he's a brilliant man. And he can write in one paragraph can be like, 40 years, I mean, it's just all this information compiled and put together from history and the church all mingled together. You're gonna have to keep your phone handy to look up words,
Yeah.
and go, but sometimes he might, one person might have 3 different ways of saying who he is, name or something. So one paragraph, he's talking about him with this title, and the next time it's his name, and then it's his nickname, I mean, so that keeps you going sometimes. But, if I can read this book, anybody can read it. And there's also a video series that Wilson loaned me that goes through the whole book. It's 6 DVDs, and that helps a lot.
We picked those up online, or do you have to buy that?
They're not all online. They're not free online, but you can buy it, or you can sweet talk Wilson, or Wilson may loan it to you.
Right, you're in the 3rd year.
Yeah.
All the materials are paid for by the church.
Yeah. Maybe I need to start reading now.
Just for recording, you may use a different thing.
That's right.
One by Gonzalo's, it's 2 volumes.
That's why it's a minute, I mean, it's just I would assume it's a game. But just them to start with, that would be probably, you're kind of productive to start somewhere, which you didn't have a foundation.
Right.
So,
And that's both with all 3 of these first 3 years. And one of the things that really challenged me was that they're written from a scholarly, historical perspective, not a faith perspective. It's not, he's not a man of faith. He's a historian. And the same with Collins, who wrote the first year book. He's a historian. And so you're getting that perspective.
Academic, it's an academic.
It's an academic scholarly book. And so I've got lots of faith stuff, but I've never looked at it through that scholarly historical perspective. So that's really helped, or it just deepened my faith ultimately. Okay, so where are we at? Year 4. Thanks, Lee.
This is the theology section, and I sat in the first 3 years, and anytime a theological question, it got too complicated, I put 4 fingers above my head and say, that's 4th year. I don't have to think that. So, and I always come in with a bag full of books. And I learned that it was okay from Jane because she comes out with a bag full of books. It works. The first book that we used. There's a book by Ford. This little book is called A Short, Very Short Introduction to Theology. And I've been through this twice now and listened to it for 4 years. It's best book, I think, as a tool on what the major principles on theology are. And it may be short, but this man can cram more stuff in 1 paragraph. And then I always say there's big words that you can't spell and you can't pronounce. And then you go to the next page, and what do you get? More big words. And there's a wonderful section in here that's worth the whole price of the book. And I thought it was beautiful the way he laid it out. I thought, there we go. Someday we'll have a adult Christian education with the outline of what he did. He doesn't put any profiles in here, but one of the ones he did do was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And this is a centerpiece of one of the great theologians of the last century. And he You really tell, he took one picture in the book, this is somebody that was really important to what he was trying to do. So with that, one of the big central pieces of this is this idea of the Trinity. And what does it mean? And that's a foundational piece for those of us that are Trinitarian Christians, and not everybody falls into that category. Then there's other books that follow on this, and so
Did
you
you
take
get all-
the very academic theology approach with all these big words and these terms, and then we take another crack at it with the mysteries of faith. And I love this book because it's stuff we can't use words to define. And we use a lot of musical examples to define. But again, the Trinity is presented in here, and we get another perspective of the Trinity. And then the third book is a man named Sedgwick, and it's on the Christian life, and it's about the ethical side. And there again, it's the Trinity. So we get the idea through this thing that Trinity is a pretty important concept, and it's one that's not easily talked about. And with that, you sort of build some of the additional reading that Rick talked about. This was a book that we read last year. It was called Reading the Bible from the Margins. And this idea is an important concept that one is trying to put into our minds. It's all about the people who are on the periphery, the women, the children, the poor, the needy. And it's the essence of the Beatitudes. And that was sort of the foundational piece of Jesus's ministry. And it goes all the way back to the Old Testament. You find pieces of it laced through the Psalms. And this is a really neat way of focusing on some of the key issues that we have to do with this. And then one of the things that we're talking about is loving your neighbor as yourself. And this is a wonderful way to end the year, is My Neighbor's Faith. This is a book that has 50 some odd short stories, a page and a half. And it's from the Muslim, Jewish, Sikh, Buddhist perspectives. But there's a commonality of finding common ground. And it's a refreshing look at this, that we have a lot more in common than we have differences. And now I live in a world of pictures and music images that are really important to me. And that's what I latch onto. So I found this book. My friend Debbie Nelson gave me this when I started EFM, and she said, "You're going to need this." And it's been the best guide that I have. When we go through the history part, there are lists by centuries in here, and it gives a whole history in one column. And that's what I keep up with Barb and Lee as they go through. And then there's Old Testament, New Testament theology, and then at the end with this book, there's profiles of all these different religions. So this is my clip notes. So when I let my homework go till Sunday night, and I have to get around the readings, and I grab this thing and it helps me put my life together. We've got some wonderful tools. And the Bible Project is one that we just discovered, and I used a video last week. And so the reading, get a 5-minute video on the book of Job. It sort of helps you pull it together and helps you remember what that is. So that's a value to adult Christian Ed. He went through the past book, and that's a really wonderful summary. And Sharon did all the coloring of all the chapter graphics for them. But it's a really neat way of getting the highlights. And the best part about some of these books is they're on audio books. So when I'm traveling back and forth from Kingsland to here, I can do the whole chapter in 30 minutes, and I don't have to do all the reading. Reading's difficult for me anyway. So it's really an adventure. I'm a slow learner. I've been at this for 6 years, so and it probably won't stick around for a year or two more. But anyway, it's a really wonderful, it's changed my life and it's allowed me to connect with.
All those books in front of you are supplement, are from the Swanee.
These are all from Swanee, except this one. And these are all the fourth year theology books that I've had to read this year.
And you actually read all of those books in one page.
But they're like equal to Lee's Critical History of Christianity. I mean, it's 1 year's worth. There's 4 books instead of a minute.
Yeah, well, it's 30 to 50 pages of reading usually a week, which is, you know, if you were a reader, 30 pages really isn't, except that sometimes 30 pages with McCullough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can, if I get through 10 pages of McCullough, I'm like, okay, time to stop. And kind of work on that and digest it. Yes, yes.
Two things I want to say, you know, this is. Sorry. But anyway, so why would you do something? Question I had in my life was when I worried about lifetime Christian. But I think even if you go to church every Sunday, you go to Bible study, especially you sort of plateau at some point in the spirit, and you're still there. It comes. And so this for me is sort of a major stepping out into conscious. That's what I did. It turned out to be very helpful. Second thing is, what's the role of the mentor you're talking about? The mentor is not a teacher. He's more than a discussion group. And all that means is she watches the talk next year, everybody has a chance to be first. I can comment on Johnny's perspective or something. Everybody gets paid. So it's not like you they're on your Bible study and that. No. Have some good ones, I've had some else, and a few other good ones, but everybody got a chance to share the chance. That's what EFM is. On a Bible study, it's significantly higher than Bible study, and you'll learn a lot of new things that you didn't really, maybe you still understood, but you probably didn't.
Thank you, lovers are.
Or were you gonna close us?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass around the Apostle Creed. Now, my take on the creed, Constantine tapping his foot, saying, I've got a horse race to get this thing done. I always say the Apostles' Creed wasn't broken, it's all here, and they should have left it alone. But anyway, we'll close by reading the Apostles' Creed. I believe in
God, Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord. He was conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit and born of the Virgin Mary. He suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended to the dead. On the third day, he rose again. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting.
Thank you all very, very much. Really appreciate it. What a great
Thank you
discussion.
so much.
Yeah.
And I learned quite a lot. Now, how much is this going to cost me?
I think the tuition is $325 or $350 for the year.
$300 about things,
No,
but
it's great.
if that's a deal breaker, I get the church to help you out with it.
They could start off with scholarships.
Yes.
Scholarship.
And the